in terms of the way it flows from the other ones where I've been doing all these technical, scientific type stuff. And when you're dealing with the sciences, it tends to have nice buckets of information. You can wrap ribbons around and say, okay, done with that, let's move on. In terms of talking about heaven, it tends to flow better. So because it flows better, I think it also takes some of the pressure off getting to an end slide by 9:45. So I think I'm gonna quit the push and start going with the flow, more like Chris does on Wednesdays. You get as far as you can, and then you start there next week, which allows me to encourage you, particularly on this lesson, to get involved, ask questions. Today we're going to be, today I'm going to try to find the right buttons. Bear with me a minute here. All right, power on, button down. No, we did that already. Bear with me, I'm getting there. Let's try this one. Why is that not working? I hate this. It is stuck on this immortality. We did this last week. I want to do it again. Yes. Okay. Okay, so now this week we're starting another topic. I could try to cram it all into 1 week, but I think it's going to be overflow. And more importantly, it is kind of more technical than story type stuff. And we're going to be dealing with a little bit more of the science type stuff and the logic and the things that make people's eyes glaze over. But it's a basic concept, the soul. If we don't understand what is the soul, then talking about heaven ain't going to mean much, okay? If you don't got your soul nailed down, then heaven's just an interesting sideline. So because we're doing this, because we have the ability to stop and ask questions and so forth, and not get to the end slide, rather than try to push through this in 1 week, I'm going to try to let it slide. We'll get into 2 weeks and so forth and so on. And because I'm not shooting for a time slot to do here, let me take a few moments to start with and ask if there's any prayers. We need to keep them. Bear with me. My memory doesn't work good, so I do this. What you got?
My cousin, Brenda Daniels in Tennessee, she's a member of the church, but she had brain surgery for a tumor on Friday.
Her name again?
Brenda.
Brenda.
She came through the surgery okay, but she's got weakness on her left side, so we'll pray for her recovery.
Okay.
But it's not, they think it's benign, they'll know for sure, but
Yeah.
Scott, the Roberts family. Sid and them, I think they've called hospice in.
They said they called the hospital.
Yes.
Yeah.
Patty?
Good.
Patty? Yeah, she's home.
Where's Patty?
She's got COVID, she said it's a mild, but she just.
Good grief. All right.
And a friend of mine,
My grandson Jack has got COVID, but it's an all case.
My friend Elba, she's in the hospital.
You have to spell that one.
Elba, E-L-B-A.
Brother-in-law, Ken Daly, he has, they don't know exactly what the diagnosis is. He's having neurological, I guess you'd say, problems. We're going to do an MRI.
I'd like for us to pray for all of our group, our members of this group here that haven't been coming to church for a long time for whatever reason.
Time to turn things around. Okay, well, we bow our heads and go to our Father in prayer. Most gracious Heavenly Father, once again we come before your throne with bowed heads and humble hearts. First of all, to give thanks. Awesome thanks. Awesome thanks for all you do for us. It's amazing. You bless us with so much, and we appreciate that. Please keep the blessings coming. We'd like to take this opportunity to ask you to reach out your loving arms and guide, guard, and protect those folks who have been mentioned over the last couple of moments. Mike's cousin, the Roberts, Patty, Pam, Joe, Harold, Steve, Jack, Elba, and Ken, for their health issues. Please be with their caretakers and give them all what they need to guide them through to their health and be thy will and bring them back to us. We also want to take this moment to ask you to help us get back together in membership, in person, in church, in Sunday school, coming back, doing the fellowship you would have us to do. And now as we go through this lesson, please help us understand these words and help it to strengthen our resolve to be Christians, to spend heaven with you, and our resolve to go out and spread your word wherever we are and wherever we go. Give us the comfort to do that. We ask this in all things in your Son's name, amen. Okay. All right, soul. So we're going to talk about the soul. The soul is like key concept in this whole. And what it boils down to is what we're kind of asking with the soul question is, are we conscious beyond the grave? Okay? We enjoy consciousness. We enjoy knowing that we are here and all the wonderful things that goes along with consciousness. But I can't imagine anybody that has never asked themselves, what will it be like after I die? Is it going to be like, am I conscious? Or is it just going to be like nothing? So that's a question we certainly have. And the way we answer this question is going to have a very large impact on our definition and our understanding of heaven. Okay? So last week we spent 40 minutes talking about the search for immortality, the drive that everybody seems to have built right into their very nature to achieve mortality. I mean, to live forever. I don't want to die. I don't want to go. I want to live forever. And if I can't live forever, we looked at some of the crazy ways people have tried to figure out, well, maybe my name will last forever. Yeah, okay. Enough of that. All right, so now we're going to search for the soul. Let's do a search for the soul. In searching for the soul, we're going to cover a concept called physicalism versus dualism, or I usually refer to not physicalism, but materialism, okay? And these are two different ways, these are two different paradigm sets, two different ways that people look at the world. And they're very different. We have lots of both. And it absolutely affects whether or not you believe you have a soul, and whether or not you're going to go to heaven. So what exactly is physicalism versus dualism? All right. Time, space, and material is all there is. That's materialism. I've been talking about time, space, and material now since last March, and I usually don't go more than a week or two without mentioning it somehow, because it is absolutely a dividing line between the religious and the non-religious, the Christians and the atheists. And let me just one more time, keep that thing up there. One more time, let me explain the basics of materialism. If you believe that everything you see, touch, hear, smell, taste, everything around you, everything you can see in the distant skies through telescopes down to the smallest of microscopes, if you honestly believe that that is all there is, then you're a materialist. You believe in a material world. Basically what you're saying is there's nothing outside of time, space, and material. You're probably of a scientific bent, which means that over the last 3 decades, you've gradually come to accept the fact that the universe has a beginning. Trust me, three decades ago, a lot of people didn't. They believed that the universe was steady state, there always been and always will be, and the reason they did that is because they didn't have to explain a beginning. Because every scientist, even the materialists, all the materialists, you can't escape the fact of something called cause and effect. Everything that shows up as an effect, if you look behind it, there's a cause, a pre-sufficient cause. If the universe had a beginning and it's made of time, space, and material, that means it's got to have a cause. And if it's got a cause, the cause can't be time, space, and material, folks. You can't create that which you already are. So that was a question that they couldn't possibly answer. Lots and lots of science is at the point now where it's almost impossible to deny the fact the universe had a beginning. Therefore, time, space, and material, or from the biblical point of view, the heavens and the earth in the beginning, same thing. Biblical and science are talking the same thing. If it had a beginning, it has to have a cause. It has to have a cause. And if you believe in logic, logic says the cause must pre-exist the effect. So then something must have existed before everything else existed. And that thing is going to be like a uncaused first cause, omnipotent, omniscient, we call him God, right? So if you believe in materialism, then you cannot believe in God. You cannot believe that there is something outside of the universe that causes things within the universe to happen. Everything that happens, every cause, has got to be made up of TSM. That's materialism. All right? All right, a materialist, someone who is a materialist, is going to believe that the brain is a machine composed of chemical compounds that are controlled only by the laws of chemistry and physics. So we've got enough science behind us to explain and to understand that the material between our ears we call gray matter, okay, called brain, is the same chemically, physically, microscopically, varies only in quantity and type from every other brain. Animal brains, fish brains, bird brains, they're all brains and they all work the same way. A synapse fires the same way in one brain as it does any other brain, and the acetylcholinesterase comes in and cleans it up again. Always the same, every brain. Well, if brain cells are in fact responding to stimuli, and whenever they are stimulated, they do the same thing time and time again. It's like, you see me, if I drop this, it's going to fall, right? And there it goes the fall. It's called gravity. Can gravity say, if you drop that thing one more time, I ain't pulling it down? No. Physical laws happen continuously, forever, okay? So if the physical laws that generate what a brain does to all brains, and every cause has to have every effect has to have a cause, then basically your head, your thoughts, your thinking, your ideas, everything that goes through your brain is not controlled by you. You don't have the ability to do anything that it's not going to do randomly, automatically, all the time. All right? In other words, if I say something or show something or do something right now, everybody's brain in this whole room has got to react the same way, because your synapses are the same as everybody else's synapses, affected by the same input under the same laws of physics. And how you react to it is not your control. And when they start to think about that, materialists get a little, well, I'm not trying to like that. But anyway, that's the materialist side of the world. They call that dancing to your own DNA. All right, dancing to your own DNA is the fancy word they give. So basically, we will accept the fact that your brain is configured according to your DNA. You've either got a human brain or a dog brain or a bird brain or a cat brain, but you know, it's configured by your DNA. However, everything in that brain is going to operate the same way. But you are configured by the same chemicals as Joe and Barbara and me and Ed and everybody else. So we do not have control of our individual brains. We are dancing to our DNA, which DNA, by the way, comes along randomly. All right, so all of our thoughts, perceptions, actions, intents, beliefs, they're all a product of our brains' randomly initiated operations. We are just dancing to our DNA. All right, any question on materialism? All right, let's.
You're saying that that's a personal attitude? I'm not sure I'm following, is everybody?
Yeah, and then please go ahead and ask up, because these are the sorts of things you're very comfortable with. What I'm saying, it is so basic, that is the very foundation of every thought you have. It's not an attitude, it's deeper than worldview, all right? It's basically saying, if I prick your finger, you're gonna say ouch, and there's nothing you can do about it. Absolutely nothing. Okay, it literally every, when you get a combination of electrical signals comes in from your nerves, your senses, your eyes, your ears, your nose, and they hit the brain, and the brains, each cell in the brain is connected to anywhere from a couple, 3 to dozens of other neurons, and you get this, literally a network of connections. So if we've got a couple million brain cells, and each brain is connected to 7 or 8 other brain cells, then the number of possible networks that could possibly fire before we run out of connections is a thought. And in the scientific world, they actually go in and they do radiometric mapping of the brain while people are thinking, and they can track the synapses that are firing, and they can electronically draw a picture of this, looks like a crazy highway map when you have a thought. And they come in and they go, clap their hands, and all of a sudden this network shows up, and they take a picture of it. And then, would you like a lollipop? And another network. And so basically you can see via all of these different networks of connections, different ones lighting up based on the input. And if we do that same input time and time and time and time again, those network synapses tend to get burned in, and that's what we call memory.
Well, how do you separate the materialism? Because that, to me, that's not connecting.
I'm confused too. You're not saying everybody brain, you have nervous systems.
Yeah.
Everybody has nervous systems, but everybody's nervous system is not alike.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you have cause and you have effect, and you have people that have different makeup, like you said, DNA or
Yeah.
damage to different areas.
Yeah.
And I know you're saying, you know, basic, you touch a hot stove, you've got sense enough to pull it off.
Yeah. All right, so if I put Nancy's finger on a hot stove, at the time I was doing one of these pictures, okay, but compared to your picture, it may be a different picture, okay, but it's going to be the picture based upon the way your brain is wired.
Right.
What the point is not that each one has different wiring. We're wired according to our DNA. It's not that we have different wiring, but that what causes the initial thing to happen is material, not immaterial. In other words, the picture that you get from the hot stove touch is going to be your picture, and you'll have a different picture. But without that hot stove touch, that picture won't come. I cannot cause that picture to come without that, this nerve cell connects to that nerve, bingo, all the way. So it's that process of getting the stimulus, the cause, all the way to the effect. Everyone's going to have a different cause and effect, but that cause and effect had to be caused by this. I can't get that picture from this by going this. It's a different nerve. That's why I said, we take 2 weeks on this section, okay? Because we need to get this It's hard to get your head around the fact because we are so much in TSM. I literally have to work hard to stop thinking in time. If I wanted to say 3 sentences and not use anything that refers to time in any of those 3 sentences, it's going to take me 10 minutes on paper to work it out. Because literally everything I say is related to that time. And the idea of something being outside of time and space and material blows people away, which means that they tend to be materialists. Until you can start explaining, well, maybe there is some things that are outside of time, space, and material. I'll jump ahead a little bit. Have you ever had a dream about something that you've never experienced, never could experience, probably couldn't happen? What triggered that? Has anyone here ever maybe written a piece of music that no one's ever heard before? Painted a painting that no one's ever seen before? Creativity. Where does that come from? Okay, so we'll get into that sort of stuff. But the key is whether or not there is a cause inside TSM or a cause external to TSM. See, mostly eyelids open and nobody's glazed over yet. All right, good. All right, back to the we are just dancing to our DNA. That violates the law of non-contradiction. That statement right there should tip us off. If you're at all into logic, that statement right there should tip us off. Dancing to your own DNA, that violates the law of non-contradiction. Why? Because if I just spent the last 6 minutes coming up with the concepts and the ideas to explain to you about this whole concept, that's conscious thought. Okay? That's not dancing to my DNA. I, in fact, am violating the concept of dancing to my DNA because I'm sitting here trying to explain to you why you are not dancing to your DNA. That's like saying there is no such thing as absolute truth. I love that. There's no such thing as absolute truth. So you walk up and say, is that absolutely true? Because if there's no such thing as absolute truth, that can't be absolutely true. It's internally inconsistent. It violates the law of non-contradiction. So even understanding or thinking, trust me, before you came in here and started thinking, before you came in here, how many people read and studied about dancing to your own DNA? Everybody that does not have their hand up just came up with something new that totally outside of your experience set. And how did that happen if you're just dancing to your DNA? And I'm looking around the room and everybody experienced it a little bit differently. Yet we've got the same neurons, the same synapses, the same chemical compounds acting under the same chemical and physical laws as everybody else in this room. And yeah, I'll bet you there's not 2 in this room that now understand this the same way. Okay? The arguments themselves fall apart very quickly. It's telling us there is something outside of TSM. Something else is out there. Something else is happening. Okay. The other side is called dualism. Dualism says that human beings have a physical body and an immaterial mind or soul. Yes, we have a physical body. Yes, we are constrained by time, space, and material. Yes, we have to live by all the physics and the chemistry, but we also have something outside of that. And we're going to call that a mind, all right? The terminology I'm going to use is the brain, and the brain functions refers to the chemical functions that occur in the organic makeup of the organ we call the brain. It receives stimuli, it does stuff, and it causes other stuff to happen. And it causes thoughts to occur. And it causes thoughts to be memorized and so forth. But this is all traceable by neurosurgeons and neuroscientists and all kinds of fancy scientists with all kinds of fancy instruments that can actually see this, model it, picture it happening. It's all occurring within that brain. Mind, however, I'm going to use the word mind to mean that there's something outside of that. So a scientist will call it the mind. A scientist that accepts the fact will call it a mind, and the normal folks will usually call that the soul. Okay, the soul that basically receives their input from somewhere else. Still cause and effect, okay? It's still cause. I think my wife thinks she's tuned into the Twilight Zone. Do not adjust the dial.
That's what we said, that. We said we like the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, trust me, when I started studying this stuff, I felt like I was tuned into, what was that guy's name?
Sterling.
Rod
Yeah,
Sterling.
Rod Sterling.
Do not touch that dial. Okay, anyway. All right, the soul hypothesis, the idea of dualism, the soul hypothesis, is actually wide accepted. It goes all the way back to early Greek times, and all throughout our Christian growth in the New Testament times. Augustine, Aquinas, Newton, Galileo, these are all folks that accepted the fact that, yeah, I am in fact a philosopher, or I am a scientist. But yes, I will accept the fact that the science that I study, the TSM that I work with, is not all there is. There is something else. All right, psychologists, actually, it's kind of interesting. Psychologists studying children actually find this idea of dualism showing up in 4, 5, 6-year-olds. In the Development Psychology book, volume 40, 2004. What they did was with kids, the kids 4, 5, 6 years old, they showed them pictures or videos or movies of an alligator eating a mouse. An alligator would eat a mouse. And then they would ask the child to describe what was going on after the alligator ate and swallowed the mouse. And the child would talk about what the alligator is feeling and what the mouse is feeling. The mouse is dead, but he's in there just, well, give me a break already, okay? At the age of 4 or 6, before he got the concept in young kids that, yeah, you may kill the body, but there's still something in there thinking about it. And this shows up more and more. By the time it gets to adults, it's very, very common. All right, so the modern scientists, they reject anything outside of TSM with the allegation that if you can't show it, if you can't prove it, you can't touch it, then it's void. Okay? It's void. If you can't show it, prove it, touch it, recreate it, then it's void, therefore you shouldn't think about it. How do forensics work? What familiar with forensics? The science of going out there after the guy got shot and figure out who shot him? How many times do they actually have eyewitnesses, maybe video cameras of the actual shooting? Not as much as they like. And yet they can still put together a pretty good case by piecing together the information and making some inferences. But yes, you can scientifically, forensics is by the way of science, you can scientifically come up with something that makes sense, reasoning to the best possible explanation. That's called, like, anthropology does that, archaeology does that, geology does that. So scientists do it when they have to, but they won't admit it. They won't admit what they're doing. They are looking at evidence that is not reproducible, it's not visible. I don't have it, I can't touch it, okay? But I can use that evidence, and in philosophy, you can even do that with thought experiments. So, scientists aren't always pure in their thinking about TSM and what's not there. So basically what they're saying is, if you can't show it, if you can't demonstrate it, then I can't use it. Remember I said when a scientist does an experiment, he has to conduct his experiment. One of the things he has to make sure is that his set of possibilities and his set of inputs is M-E-C-E, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. That basically means that if you're going to honestly test something with the scientific method, it must include all the possible inputs and ways things come in, but it must also include all the possible ways things come out. Because if you decide up front that you're not going to consider these, you never pick them. What the scientists do is they consider up front when they're designing their experiments, God doesn't exist. Well, lo and behold, that's not a worry. We just have to find something else. So when they're faced with literally 25 to 30 years of hard science saying that the universe began, what was the cause? Well, they know the cause. It couldn't be God. It doesn't exist. Therefore, we have hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of scientists spending bajillions of government dollars trying to find the answer to that question when they've already excluded the answer from their subset. That ain't good science. All right, so if you're a materialist, the only evidence you'll accept will be time, space, and material, but lack of TSM cannot prove outside TSM doesn't exist, okay? You can't prove that. Let's explain it. All right. Well, how do people explain it? Let me explain what I'm asking first of all. If you cannot use the argument that just because I didn't find something, it doesn't exist, okay? If you're looking for your car keys that you left in the bedroom, if you look in the kitchen and you don't find them, does that mean your car keys do not exist? No, you looked in the wrong place, okay? I mean, that's not rocket science. And yet, by not seeing it where I'm looking, therefore does. If I'm going to search for a God, and a God by definition is outside of TSM, but I don't believe there is anything outside of TSM, therefore I'm looking and I don't see God, he must not exist. You see how their arguments fall apart internally. I don't ever get to a discussion. Okay. Oh yeah, all right, I'm getting ahead of myself, self-denial. So if you find yourself in this box, we can't get out of this box, what do? Well, you start by self-denial. If you don't believe it can be true, then any evidence from it can't be accepted. That's what we just talked about. Is your worldview secular or theistic? Classic example is the Yuri Gagarin, his first space trip, and Buzz Aldrin when went to the moon. All right, what's the difference between those two guys? How did they react to their surroundings? Yuri Gagarin said, "I looked and looked and looked, but I didn't see God. There is no God." And this was his explanation from the spacecraft. Buzz Aldrin, he read Psalm 8, and he actually had to tell Houston to shut up and be quiet. I want to read you something. Okay? When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you care for him? That's the difference between a secular and a theistic worldview. Okay? Let's look at Matthew 10:28. What does the Bible tell us? Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both body and soul in hell. What's the inspired writer telling us? First of all, there is a soul. And they can go different directions, but they can both be destroyed in hell. There is something outside of TSM. Okay, if you can accept the uncaused first cause, omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, cause TSM to come into existence, then there is evidence for the soul. So if we can find some way of showing that there is something outside of TSM, then what we're saying is essentially God exists. And if God exists, whatever he chooses to do exists, because if he can make us exist, He can make anything exist,
Right.
okay? Yeah,
Stephen Hawking, who I told you before, makes gravity out to be God.
yeah, that's heavy.
I always replied to him because when he was asked the question, well, your own science says that's never could happen. So what proof do you offer? And he smirked and said, because we are here. And as soon as that interview was played, I shouted at the TV, I can just as well say, my belief that God is the first cause can be proven because we are here.
Because we're here.
Yet that answer went over great with the scientific.
Absolutely.
Because we are here,
Hey,
drop the
absolutely.
mic.
When you leave out half the possible subset of solutions, acceptance comes real easy. Good.
Perhaps there's an analogy that we can use that to a certain extent of, or parallel possibly. If you take science back many years ago, no one knew germs or viruses or things like that existed. So you know, that wasn't part of the thinking of why illnesses came, and there were all kinds of theories and thoughts, and the science today said something completely different. And now with the advent of microscopes and the like, we see those things. And so I think there's a certain parallel there that just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there, of course. And if you were working science or anything at the time before microscopes, it wasn't even something that was conceivable.
What you're describing was a process that actually had a major shift back around 25 years ago. Longer than that now. Oh my gosh. Right as we graduated college. A lot longer than that ago, okay? And that shift was this. Anybody who didn't, it was called the God of the Gaps. It became known as the God of the Gaps. And the argument was, just because you don't know how it happened, you guys throw God in there and say, well, he did it, okay? It's a God of the gaps. But if you give us another year's worth of funding on my experiment, hire 2 more assistants and we can work harder, we'll get it for you next year. And sure enough, after another years and years and years of that, an awful lot of the arguments that people were using to support God back then fell. Was as we started learning that the cell was not just protoplasm, but, oh my God, DNA, oh, molecular machines. My gosh, it can do some of that stuff all by itself without God. They just fell. About many, many years ago, we started coming up with experiments that could not be attributed to natural causes because it literally violated the very laws that science used to come to their conclusions, okay? And I kind of put them in a bind. And so that then you start turning around. So now we're starting to use the God of the ungaps against them, all right? They're saying, well, yeah, okay, so we did have a big bang, so we did have a start. We don't know what's outside there, but we'll find out if you'll fund my project for 1 more year and hire 2 more assistants. So that it basically had a reversal. Yeah.
It's interesting how man a few years back would think that all you had to do to develop rats and mice was to put a bunch of rags in a shed, and that's all. And put it in there, and spontaneous combustion, you'll have the rats and mice.
Yeah, that's only about 300 years old, by the way, that particular example. What I use when I hear people denying this outside has anyone seen Mesher, the artist, Mesher drawings? Kind of like, they're hard to understand. They're like 3-dimensional, looks like you're climbing upstairs in 4 different directions. There's one of his famous drawings, and I love it, is the drawing of a hand drawing a hand. Okay? That's it, just a hand drawing a hand. But wait a minute, where'd the head come from the start of the drawing? Well, the other hand. Where'd that head come from the start of it? Well, the other hand. So it's just a picture of a hand drawing a hand. Okay, work on that for a while. You can't create yourself, folks. What was that song, I Am My Own Grandpa? Yeah, no, that doesn't work. Logic falls apart. All right, where are we? Okay, so we're looking for evidence outside of TSM that proves something outside of TSM that can prove an object, a person, a force outside of TSM that can talk to us, create us, and so forth. We're looking for God. Consciousness, the idea of consciousness is outside of brain activity. And it's amazing how people just accept being conscious without really thinking where conscious comes from. We got a lot of people here sitting side by side with different neural nets and different makeups, and yet we are all conscious of the things around us differently than the person next to us. Let's look at consciousness. Things like original ideas, music, art, stories, events, desires. What is the TSM input, the cause of any of these things? When Mozart sat down to write Eine kleine Nachtmusik, why did he decide to do this and not the other guy who lived next door that had the same brain chemistry and physics as everybody else? What came to him that was different? What came to any artist that writes a piece of music or draws a piece of art? Anything that is creative, by the very definition, is creative. Okay? It is not reactive, it is creative. Yeah, good.
So I'm gonna throw a, Rich into some of that saw a thing recently on artificial intelligence that, given enough data input that now some of the AI can come up with solutions to puzzles or games or medical problems that has not been thought of before.
Okay. So basically what we're saying is this. AI appears to be influenced by something outside, but what's really happening is all the possible subsets of events in your mind or her mind. Say 300 people decide to sit down and write an AI program. Well, they had to put in that AI program the ability to capture all the possible ways things can event. I guarantee you, pick any event, the odds of any of us getting even 1% of all of them is like zip, okay? What we're talking about is programs now that start exploring new event combinations and how they affect each other based on what in the past. Well, guess what? We do that too. We call it growing up. We call that growing up. The third time I touched the hot stove, I cut that out.
I wanted to present that because that's going to be a pushback
Oh yeah,
on this thing of.
but it's not outside. It's merely new ways of looking at the same stuff inside in different combinations and event sequences, causing different outcomes, which by the way now creates a new set of events that have to be, and so forth and so on. It's not that we can't go there, it's just that we haven't bothered to go there. I suppose if we put enough smart people together in the same room, we could keep up with the AI. But I have trouble doing it at the speed that these computers are doing it. And understanding a new event sequence is not creative. It is reactive. Yeah.
But it still takes the human mind to do these things. It still takes them.
Oh, absolutely. Create software of any kind. Bottom line is intelligence. Intelligence only comes from minds. No intelligence ever came from brain. Intelligence comes from minds. So if you see something that shows signs of intelligent design or intelligent execution, there's a mind behind it. If you look at was it in the president's Mount Rushmore? If you look at Mount Rushmore, you think, man, I tell you what, the wind and the freezing rain and the rock, it made a pretty picture up there. Or was there some intelligence behind it? Okay? And then they'll come back to you and say, well, look at cars. Look at your vet sequence. If you look at the first vet and the last vet, there's like 11 or 12 different basic body styles and so forth and so on. And see, we are inventing that and increasing in complexity, and it's all just our minds happening. But who's behind that? They're called design engineers. And what are they doing? They're designing, they're using intelligence. So, if you see intelligence, you're looking at something outside of TSM. Try that telling that to your teacher though, but you still failed the test, okay? All right, so original ideas, music, art, that's the example coming from outside. All right, here you go. The smell of coffee, the color red, the taste of watermelon, the thrill of a bungee jump, okay? How is that coming from physical reactions in your brain? The color red, all right, the color red. Now, we all may agree on what the color red looks like because we've been trained, but we all perceive the color red in our own way. If we had a neuroscientist, a brain scientist, and I'm using this as an example because she exists and she's documented in her book. She was blind from birth, and she studied the brain and the eyes and the mind and everything. Being blind, eyes were something that interested her. And so she literally said she had like 2 PhDs in neuroscience or something. And there was not much you couldn't talk to her about the physics, the chemistry, and the biology and the medicine of the brain. And then something extraordinary happened. She gained her sight. She actually gained her sight. All right? When she first opened her eyes and saw everything, saw the color red, did she learn anything new? When she first opened her eyes, she knew what people looked like. They've been described to her. She knows what red looked like. It had 375 nanometer light and so forth. She knew all of that, so she had the technique. But when she opened her eyes, the moment she opened her eyes, she learned a lot, okay? Because she experienced it. She now is in there, seeing it. And that is outside of TSM, okay? Experiencing something is outside of TSM. It's an input you get into your life, your body, your brain, that is far above the touch on the finger of the hot stove. And you learn things from it. Because, and if you ask people to describe it, how many times have you said, well, tell me what happened? And somebody will try to explain to you what happened at the party, or what happened last night, or what happened somewhere, and after about 4 or 5 attempts, you're going, You say, well, I guess you just had to be there, okay? Well, why did you just have to be there? Because in order to get over that hump, you had to experience it. You had to actually be there, literally, okay? And we're getting outside of TSM here when we do this. So intelligence and design is the product of a conscious mind, not a material brain. Think about it. If you say consciousness is just a random coming together of molecules and whatnot in your brain, if in order to deny consciousness, in order to come up with a thought, consciousness is not real, I'm not going to deny righteousness, deny consciousness, you have just made a conscious decision with a conscious thought. All right? See how these things fall apart real quickly? You just turn it back on yourself and they go, whoops. Remember that Roadrunner, way back in week 1, the Roadrunner chasing Wile E. Coyote off the cliff, and he looks around and I'm not standing on anything. Okay, Wile E. Coyote. You got Wile E. Coyote going on here. They're out there publishing books, making millions on their tours, and then someone says, hey, Wiley, what you standing on? Whoops. All right. We're burning time. In fact, we burn too much. So we're not covering very much quantity-wise, but hopefully we're going deep enough. We'll pick it up here next week. Thank you very much. I ran over.